Season 10. It's a big fat round number that actually gave me some question marks about whether this was the end of the road for the series or not, but turns out not even close, but just one of those moments where you start to ask yourself what are we doing here? The Chilcotin here with Eric at his trap cabin was on the to-do list for a lot of years, actually. I think since I even met Eric, we had talked about making it to his cabin, but this cabin is in the middle of nowhere. It's at the time I think you had to drive for 15 hours or something and 3 hours past cell service and a sled ride in the middle of January. So we both had some time. We both had really wanted to do this for a very long time. So these 2 episodes became more than what I expected.
Like you read that, and you mic drop.
Classic. The hook for me wasn't the mud soup idea, although that was fun. That was just a fun idea of Eric's. This right here, this landscape, and the backstory of Eric, which I didn't really intend to dive into too hard, but once you settle in for a few days and start putting microphones and cameras on people in a place that really matters to them, you start getting some interview content that maybe you wouldn't expect. So this became really a character piece about Eric, which I really love. They're 2 of the strongest episodes of the entire catalog, in my opinion, story-wise. So this is just us arriving at Eric's cabin, dead middle of January, and we spent 10 days there. So, this was a long go. Eric's such a cool guy. Eric and his dad built this place. So the cabin's just rad.
We were sent out. Dad liked his clover blossom tea, so often he'd send us out to the hay meadow.
So look at all the character there. That chair was made by his dad. That beam with the worm activity on it. Every little thing in there has got story. The fire kit behind him has story. So this place is just woven with all these cool elements that Eric is just part of Eric's life, part of his history, which is just really, really neat. There's so much genericism in the outdoor experience now. Like, you can just go buy your gear, buy your accommodation, or whatever it is that you're just gonna transact with. This has kind of got soul in it throughout. Now, this was a bonkers idea. I didn't think this would work. Eric wanted to build a smoker. The whole idea of the episodes was to work on smoke, something we could do in the wintertime together. Smoked cocktails, smoked meats, that kind of thing. But Eric wanted to build the smoker in the ground, so step 1 was burning this gigantic fire for, I think, overnight or for a day, to melt all the snow and to melt the ground and defrost it, because it was frozen solid. It's the dead middle of January. So just a bold idea that was he just picked away at and executed brilliantly. No surprise there, I suppose.
Eric's out.
All right, self-shooting. I think something maybe people don't know is that I shot this all by myself, including the scenes that are by myself. So a bit of a trick, this. This was an important kind of breakthrough for me. Mel Finn had asked about the flavor anise, and anise was important to unlock a bunch of different things in the world of booze, and absinthe is one of them. Anise is also used in so many other things. I tell people all the time on foraging walks, like, this plant unlocks Italian sausage with like paprika and fennel. It unlocks Indian food type, anything that uses fennel seed. Sweet Sicily is relevant for. So that tincture right there is just a Sweet Sicily tincture. I picked the green pods in the summertime, and I was endeavoring to make an absinthe. So I had, kind of a bottle there that was a standard that I was going to make or try to approximate. And then kind of the components that I knew were part of absinthe, including wormwood, Artemisia absinthium, which is a fun one to play with all the time. We've been mucking with that for a few years, making vermouths and stuff, but it's also a key component of absinthe. Wormwood used to be an anti-parasitic, which I think is super fascinating. So it was consumed because it has a nice flavor, but also because it was just good for deworming your human body, which is kind of gross and weird and awesome. So yeah, I mean, film-wise, what I like about this particular scene is the hard window light. I really like that. I think that's just a neat vibe. And then I like that this scene intercuts between what Eric's doing outside and me inside, keeping in mind that like I filmed the whole thing. So this is kind of just an editing maneuver that I really enjoy now. You'll probably see more of is when you have kind of a couple different things happening. I'm able to film, both of those activities and then weave them together, so it's a little bit more dynamic of a scene. Not easy to do. I shouldn't say that. I mean, it takes some intention in post. That's about it. I mean, it's that you just need to have some cool scenes that kind of are happening roughly at the same time. This table is an old table that Eric's dad built, I suspect, and again in Eric's cabin here. What a great wide shot. I love that shot. So good. So good. The only regret of this trip is everyone that had attended this, been in the space, had etched their name into one of the log beams in the building, and I didn't do that. Why? I have no idea. So here's the second episode. First one was called the Chilcotin, which is the region, and then a second episode I called the Chilcotin with an A instead of an I, being all smart, trying to be smart, trying to be overly clever. Because this was so much about Eric rather than the region. And Eric's finishing up his endeavor to get to mud soup. The idea of mud soup is just the stuff on the bottom of the water bodies in these types of regions contain enough biological material that you could just survive on that alone. Eric's big time interested in survivalist kind of stuff and prepper kind of stuff. And so this was a really interesting question mark that he just wanted to pick away at. And as you can tell, when if it gets to be hard, Eric does not shy away in that moment. So really cool to see a guy just kind of get an idea in his head and go for it. He's wearing rain gear, I think. Almost. Back in season 6, I guess this is why we're here. Back in season 6, Eric was already doing cold plunges in the ice. We didn't film it, but it was something that he was doing while in that camp that we did an episode about birch. So this whole notion of him getting into this ice water was not his first rodeo. And that's become something that's really important to me, is I'm not really just interested in filming people do extreme, semi-bonkers things for camera, but this is something he does on the regular. It's something that he's very used to. We are in the middle of nowhere here, so, if were something to go wrong, it would not be the awesome. So, it was, I don't know what my point is, other than he's done this before. And when he said he wanted to go down there and get it in the middle of winter, get this mud off the bottom of the pond, I thought, well, I wouldn't be surprised. And there he goes.
Go down here and get some mud.
I think he was expecting it to be less like peaty and rooty and more like silty muddy. So the texture of this stuff wasn't what he was expecting, which was, I mean, it wasn't the primary objective. It was a question mark, this whole scene, this whole thread. So I wasn't terribly concerned at the time whether or not it was going to be optimal mud or suboptimal mud. Really love the sound in there, a sloshing of the water with the dead calm and silence of the snow of winter. This scene is I'm really proud of this one actually, because again, you've got a camera over top of talent, and then he's whacking on something and I'm smashing on something in the same kind of moment, and which happened, but I also was just moving cameras around the whole time so that you could intercut. Again, I could intercut this scene of a couple different pieces of action happening at the same time. One film guy two scenes and the film guy's in one of the scenes. It's really not easy to do. It takes a long time to kind of figure that out. So you got the close-ups there on as well, on what my hands are doing, and then a wide. So there's two cameras on me, and then I'm grabbing a cam and hopping on top and shooting some cutaways. So difficult, and then there's me in a different shot. So I don't. It's an interesting technical challenge, and it's fun when they come together like this. Shooting by kerosene lantern, which you need really fast lenses for, meaning they need to be really good quality to be able to work in that kind of low light. I wanted to smoke a cocktail on this trip, and Eric is chiseling a handle, a latch, a hatch, a hasp, I don't know, onto a cellar door that in this episode he's digging out his root cellar underneath the cabin. It's pretty cool. And I'm smoking a glass with Betula glandulosa, or scrub birch. We played with a few different woods, but Betula glandulosa was the rock star of this trip for sure. And Betula, here we skipped ahead. I smoked this whitetail pastrami with Betula glandulosa too. Cool part of this, I guess, the weaving of threads again, is that this grilled cheese sandwich, which trying to like avoid fancy pretentious looking food all the time and make something that people can relate to the odd time, that's Mel's dough from the prior hunting season, a couple months prior in season 9, and I took a piece of its round and brined it, and then smoked it with Betula glandulosa, and then put it in a grilled cheese sandwich in the middle of nowhere. So again, the episode concept was smoke, something that we can do in the winter and play with, and that grilled cheese sandwich looks delicious, and I want to eat it right now again. Grilled cheese is like, I don't know, it's one of those things that I could eat it every day, and you can riff on it, make it fancy, not fancy. And a fun little example of like Eric's just doing his thing. He was fixing a chainsaw because it had all frozen up with water in its exhaust system, and I'm sitting there filming myself make lunch. That's where I slept. That was my bed on the right. Oh, and we're out. Wow. Pacific Northwest on the west side of Vancouver Island. That is Ocean Camp right there, the little island that I've called home for the last few years, ever since working there with Finn Steiner. And that's it. What you see is what you get there. Half the time there's a fire ban, so you can't do this, and then half the time this was early, this was May, so I had the ability to make a fire. This was a hard trip. This goes into the most difficult trips that Kevin has ever done in his career, because I was solo. I was by myself sea kayaking, which is a bit dangerous because if something goes sideways, it's the Coast Guard that needs to bail me out. And what? And I'm self-filming the whole episode, so I have to do all the food segments, I have to do all the beverage stuff, and I have to do all the filmmaking. That's fine, but I also have to do all the camp daily activities of living in camp. I have to do all the fishing and foraging and all of that stuff. And then another layer is that this episode, the next 2 episodes were basically, I got to a point where I ran out of power, and everything became, the whole production was the first one I did entirely on solar power, I would say. The episode after this one I ran out of power and kept up with the sun. So I've got a solar setup that fits in my sea kayak, in addition to all my sea kayak gear. My camping gear and all my film gear have to fit in that little boat right there, which is not the easiest thing to do. This is also not an easy thing to do, to film yourself with a drone while you're sea kayaking, because you have to put it has to take off on land, and then you got to get out in the water and fly it around like a silly person, and then get back and put it back down on the land. I won't land it in my hand on the boat. I just won't. Too complex, too many moving objects, too many moving pieces, and if the drone gets like blooped into the ocean, that's the end of that. So play it pretty safe on that front. That is some amazing water clarity, and that's Macrocystis pyrifera, or giant kelp, and I really wanted to focus on this year, this particular season, because it was the most common seaweed in the area, and I knew that from prior trips out onto the west coast here. I had always seen more like bull kelp and other species, but in this area, this particular species loves it. It grows super fast. It's super easy to work with, so I wanted to dig in. So the whole food kind of situation here is all about giant kelp. And these are some really beautiful drone shots. That water clarity is bonkers. I've filmed this beach a lot now and underwater here a lot, and this is some of the nicest water clarity that I've shot for sure. When we were filming freediving with Finn, he was telling me like the number one thing with diving and especially filming it is water clarity. Hey, don't cut yourself with a knife. Use kitchen scissors. That's a good tip. Because the year before, I think I'd ended up in the hospital because I cut myself with a knife in my sea kayak in that very boat. And there's still blood stains on my first aid kit that go into my day hatch just to remind me what not to do. Love the teals and oranges in this whole scene. Look at the red seaweeds underneath all of that giant kelp, and all that motion is so cool. There's so much activity on the west coast on the shores from all the wave action. This wasn't a particularly heavy swell stay, like 2 meter seas kind of thing, which is not that bad. But I wasn't used to it. I was motion sick pretty bad in this episode, on top of having to kind of film everything and sort everything out and catch my food and cook my food and film all that. I had to also try to not be sick. And seasickness, if you don't know, like a lot of motion sickness, hangs in with you, hangs in there. So that's a lot of food. I'm at the point now where I'm about to explore going onto this beach with no food. No meat or vegetables or fruit. Maybe some carbs, we'll see. But definitely some flavor stuff, just because I don't want to eat super straight food. But the idea that there's so much abundance on these little tiny islands that you don't have to bring food crossed my path on this episode, and then fast forward a couple years and I've gotten to the point where I think I can do it. Super cool textures. Always love to fill a frame with a subject like that. That's just something that's just always done it for me. And then these types of slider close-ups I really love. I always have. To me, there's always a place for your brain visually to go there, and then release the viewer into a wide like that. That's a mega wide with me just a little bit lit, and then kind of focus on what I'm doing. So just to dive into that a bit. One of the things that I've realized that I do, and that I'm pretty proficient at apparently, is having a read on kind of what the next shot needs to be. So here I've got a close-up on my hands, and I knew I had to connect that to a wide of me manipulating that same kit, and then moving on to the next step, and then a close-up of me doing the next step. This is the same camera. So it's like, do some stuff, stop, move camera, set it up, do some stuff, stop, move camera, set it up. So it's a lot of stop and go and 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 stop and go. And ideally you would have a couple cams here, and I think maybe I do. I don't think I do. My sea kayak is such a severe limitation on equipment. Like you can't just bring more gear. That's just not an option. So thankfully I've figured out how to fit my A cam into my sea kayak, so this isn't all shot with a GoPro. And we're out. Episode 4. This is entirely solar-powered shoot, and this is Justine, one of my sea kayak guide instructors, and actually no, she wasn't one of my instructors. She was somebody that the instructors had recommended I meet up with because Justine was a well-known filmmaker in the sea kayaking industry. So, that's what she's done her whole career. So we got together, and here we're putting out to go to some gnarly water that Justine is completely fine with and thinks nothing of, and is terrifying for a guy that lives in Alberta on flat land. So notice her proficient paddle stroke. That's a difficult shot to do when you're me. That's a drone over her shoulder. And that's where we're going fishing, is all that gnarly, nasty boomers, the rocks and water there just off to the right. So here, relying heavily on GoPros, obviously, for stuff like this. She's obviously not concerned about getting close to rocks. This is not, Justine's like the highest level of guide instructor, I think, that you can achieve in sea kayaking. I would not recommend, if you're beginning in sea kayaking, to think that this scene is something that is just kind of normal, that you would do at a beginner level. This is not that. There was points where Justine was hooked up on bottom again, and like right next to a gigantic boomer or a rock, and she's trying to unhook her rig from the bottom of the ocean while trying not to crash into a gigantic rock that's appearing and disappearing in the big huge swell. Don't do that. Make sure you know some stuff first. Some cool tricks. Ocean fishing from a sea kayak's a whole different game. If you know how to fish, like she just slipped her rod into her under her spray skirt, and there's a lot of little tricks that are necessary to be able to navigate that size of craft. Your rod can't be too long, for example, because if you do catch a fish, you need to be able to net it, and the distance, you need to be able to get the fish right close to you. Another thing is, you would think you would want to look where she's headed, just in there. That's fine. What could go wrong? It'll be fine.
Land, to beautiful places on land that I wouldn't otherwise get to go.
You would think you would need a little net on a boat like that, on a little boat, but you actually need a big net because you're in the ocean catching ocean-sized fish. She sets the hook well there. Notice her paddle is kind of being managed by her elbows. It's not tethered to her boat. So you're kind of always, not worried, but aware of where your paddle is. It's the only means that you have of getting around. And she has a little lingcod on there. Not that it matters much. She completely outfished me. I grew up ocean fishing on the inside waters of Vancouver Island, on the east side of it. And one of the things I learned hard working with Finn is that if you have the wrong gear or the wrong technique, the west waters you're just gonna fail. For some reason, the approach that's very thorough bonking. She's still bonking. Oh, yeah, there you go. That's very conscientious killing a fish. She's actually about to do something here that I carried forward in my life, and you'll see me film in a later episode. That's halibut. She's degilling and gutting the fish from the sea kayak and putting gillless fish into a dry bag inside her hull. And so I started gutting all my fish that way, just through the mouth, through their face, as soon as you catch them. And it's been fantastic. I'll continue to do that kind of forever. And notice what she's using. She's using pliers, not a knife, not even kitchen scissors, just a set of pliers. So that's also, I steal Justine and JF's technique for that. If you've got a set of pliers in your boat, you can basically manage everything with a fish that you need to do, which is just kind of shocking. I had the chance last year to guide kayak fishing for the first time. It was kind of an honor as a guy who's been a hobbyist for a long time. It's kind of neat to step into a position with paid guests that are, when we were living, I was actually guiding with Justine, and we were on an expedition for a week, living off of the fish with 13 people, living off the fish that we could catch. So I had a real sweet moment for me that was where everyone else was having a hard time, meaning Justine's crew and JF's crew were having a hard time, but it was my crew that slayed all the fish and fed the team for the day, so that made me happy. So here I'm trying to just look at the wave action, and this is nothing for swell out there. This is just like a little dilly-dally in the bigger water. I still find that kind of stuff petrifying. I've been in this spot when it was scary, and it was terrifying. I would never, ever, ever want to find myself there in the wrong spot at the wrong time. And then keep in mind, if something goes wrong for me in this moment, I can help, or Justine can help me, and vice versa. So as soon as there's two people involved, and two relatively competent people involved on sea kayaks, you're like, my risk management changes a lot. I wouldn't normally go here to fish, but with Justine there, think nothing of it. But solo, way more conservative, way more careful. Yeah, that's the spot. And then we headed back. Justine's goal was to deep fry some fish. It's something she makes on trip that she was confident in making. Having guided a bit with Justine, or a week or so after, last year, she is incredible at putting up food for guests in remote locations. If I had to be on a team with anybody doing that, in my entire life, having worked with a lot of people in my career, Justine would be it. So we're going to be doing it again this coming year, which makes me happy. I caught like 2 of those fish, and she caught the rest. Okay, wild caraway. This is cave camp. That's all Betula glandulosa, by the way. So we traveled to the Chilcotin to find this plant, and then found out that cave camp, that's the main bush. But I really wanted to target this plant, wild caraway. It's an invasive species. It tastes really neat. That green seed right there tastes kind of like a green coriander seed would. If you're not familiar with cilantro, coriander, the flowers and the leaves and the seeds all taste quite different and all really nice. And caraway is the same. And I'd found that out the year prior, kind of dabbled in it in caraway with Mel, found out that it was here. And so this time around, I really wanted to give it a heavy go. What's the backstory? What's the interesting bits here? This trip we got hailed on so hard on the way in that I think it chipped my windshield, my Jeep. Something car got damaged. It was so bad. And look at the water and the roads back there. Like getting into this location is not always a guaranteed thing. It's when you arrive, you cross your fingers and hope that you can get in. You could always hike the last bit of it in, but we have a lot of gear when you take the camera equipment and all the kind of base camping stuff into account and all the food stuff, and we could come into this camp pretty heavy actually. So this trip for me, I had just come off sea kayaking for a fair while. There's a fun shot. Self-shooting all this, of course, and so it's, worrying about wides and close-ups and so on. This trip was like a breath of fresh air. It's easy. You just wheel in with the vehicle, throw the crap out of your truck, and get to having fun. Sea kayaking is infinitely harder, so this was a nice break. Yeah, what's there to say? This is a drink, I think I mentioned it in the episode, that I thought would be okay, and it turned out it was exceptionally delicious, which is always fun. It's an aquavit mule, and I don't love caraway. Well, I didn't love caraway, actually. I just was trying to be open-minded and work with, an ingredient that I knew a lot of other people liked. But in this case, this aquavit ginger beer kind of cocktail vibe thing was so stunning, so stellar. I would make this again in a heartbeat. Since this episode, I do pick wild caraway. We use it a fair bit, dried in kind of cracker components and any kind of bread thing that we can fold it into, we will. It's just really familiar flavor that people are kind of used to. And it actually grows, wild caraway grows right at the road by our camp where a lot of people visit us out by Rochester for events. So it's around, like, I think I've found it across the province at this point. In this particular area, it's super abundant, like it's really easy to find and there's lots of it, but it is pretty widespread. So if you don't know Mai too much, Mai is, I met her as a student of mine, I guess, on the foraging side. She'd attended some walks and some events, and has proven to be like this scene reminded me, like, man, she's really adept as a home cook, not an industry professional, at just coming up with some really beautiful flavors and plating well and kind of keeping a cool head with cameras and food. And she's just really fun to play with in the kitchen. So it's neat to see like her confidence here. It's just nice to see somebody that is with other food people, other industry professionals, and she doesn't get fazed by it at all. She just kind of jumps in and does her thing, and it's at a very high level, which is really, really cool to see. So she'd brought some beets into this. Those are the roasted beets, and yeah, she's talking about it here. So there's nodding onion blossoms in there. There's the smoked fish that we smoked with Betula glandulosa. I'm pretty proud of this, actually. The food in this episode was some of the best, and I think John's about to say that. Those wild caraway rye crackers fried in butter and then topped with smoked fish. Yeah, that's how that tasted. That's how that was. Absolutely unreal. It was so good. I want to eat that again.
Always prepared when you eat something. You know what this means?
Oh, I miss John.
Everything that has hit my palate is perfect.
John's currently living on a sailboat, so he hasn't been around for a while, and this is one of the last, I guess, episodes that he would have been in.
That was one of
One
the
of.
best wins that
Probably
I've
the last full
had
episode that he was in season 10, and then he
was
wasn't
like-
in season 11 at all,
There
so
was three
really neat to see my buddy.
completely different tastes in my mouth. Like, with
The fishing was tough on this trip. It was a good example of my brain just went to like, who cares? And mine, I picked mushrooms and picked plants and we played with other things and ate amazing food and drank amazing drinks. And this was some of the best food and beverage that's happened on the show. And fishing was horrifically bad, and it just didn't matter. And so I've preached that before. It's just this is a nice example of it playing out.
And in my everyday
Eden.
life, and just kind of put me in the moment.
Eden I met during Cook It Raw 10 years ago, I think, and we really hadn't played in the field much together since then, but we got along really well. Oh, she was in season 4 from The Wild. She was at the protest dinner at the end of season 4 where we had the police officers in the kitchen. None of us will ever forget that. So after that, Eden and I had kind of been in touch a number of times and been like, we need to do something in the Rockies. So my goal here, I guess, was to, I found Eden inspiring as a chef because she does this stuff on the regular. This isn't her learning how to rock climb. This is her doing hiking and rock climbing that she does multiple times a week and all year long. Just super active, healthy, fit, outdoorsy chef, which isn't always, it's kind of a new era, I think, in the kitchen industry where this is kind of being super embraced and looked up to versus the kind of well-known, toxic, not so good parts of the culinary industry. So she's just kind of a leader in this space. So filming rock climbing, first time. I didn't really know what to do. Bit of unsafety here as I was not geared up with helmets. They forgot to gear me up with headgear, and I was going to be at the bottom of this cliff, so we had to have a bit of a chat about that. Her partner up at rock face is a first responder, so it's nice to be with people who are professional first aid, knowledgeable people who are cautious about safety and such. So up she goes. So this is filming her with a drone and a really long lens, and she's got a GoPro. So one of my kids recently asked, how did you film all this? So here we go. That's a 200mm lens, looking up from the bottom. Love that shot. So cool. It kind of gives you an idea of how kind of precarious and extreme this is, even though it's like safe and it's a bit of this isn't I don't think a very difficult climb. It just was something that was close and convenient that we could shoot that morning. But this lens perspective sure gives you an idea of kind of that nasty rock face. And then look at that. So cool. These drone shots were better than I expected, I guess. I thought they'd be cool, but I mean, that's one of my favorite shots of this season for sure. Look at her on that rock face. So cool. What a beautiful area. And the Alpine for me is one of those things from since the day it was born, I really wanted to mix in different geographies, physical geographies, instead of it just looking like the same all the time, like the Boreal or anywhere. It just kind of gets to look the same all the time. And so that type of Rocky Mountain aesthetic or visual difference has been something that I've wanted to keep in the series forever. So it's another big reason for the gratuitous rock shots. So this is not me with the camera. I'm way down there at the bottom, and I'd sent them up with a GoPro to film the last of her ascent. Thankfully, they're not new to GoPros because that's something that you do in this hobby. And she's way the heck up in a place I would not go, especially with camera gear. Super cool. This is just going up to the Spray Valley from Canmore. That's where Eden's restaurant's in Canmore. I guess I should have mentioned that. And it has been for a long time. She's kind of second gen independent restaurant in Canmore. So beautiful. The clouds were just like zooming through that valley that morning. That wasn't a time lapse. That was just how fast the stuff was moving. Oh, so gorgeous. What a beautiful place we live in. So this is the Powder Face Road, and we were going to be picking fireweed and cow parsnip. And this is the birth, this is important, I included this because this is the birth of cow parsnip cocktail, which has become an important staple in the bar in camp, and is delicious. It's like watermelon rindy and cucumbery, and super punchy and bold and vivacious. And this was me going, I don't know. Robert Rogers had introduced me to it. Thanks, Robert. And just the tincture. And this is me trying to cocktail it for the first time. Big win. Probably top 3. If it's not number 1, it's top 3 best cocktail discoveries of the series is this particular plant. Also happens to be a super powerful antiviral, which is why Robert had it in his kit. So I thought that's pretty neat, having just come out of a pandemic, that there's this plant that's really, really good for viruses. I am in Crazy Weed there. This is Eden's restaurant, so I'm just in the front of the house. There's a big key light of windows. Just set up so that it's facing the windows and well lit. This interview shot back at one of her places. I think they sold this place, not that that matters. Beautiful plates by Eden. I was expecting that. That's cow parsnip salt on matsutake, and we can have a big chat if you're a mycologist and want to take me on about the Latin of that particular species, because it is quite likely it's not matsutake, but it's a very close relative and tastes largely the same. And that's one of the more brilliant dishes, plant-based dishes of the series. That's a fireweed dish. And now we're about to meet somebody for the very first time. I've named a couple episodes after people. One was Carrie Holstead back in, I think, season 5. This episode was named Jordan after Jordan Madley. She was forager gal from Ontario that I'd bumped into online, a student of a mentee of Jonathan Forbes from Forbes Wild Foods out in Ontario. And so Jordan and I had kind of, I don't know, crossed paths quite a bit before this, and endeavored to get her on the show. Now, she does like acting stuff for a living, so this is, her on camera is not new to her. But she was keen to hunt, and this was her very, very first hunting trip. And she did extremely well. She is one of those humans that kind of catches on to everything quick. And so those were grouse that she'd shot, and that was her first ever butchery attempt, and she did a really, really great job. A cool spin on what she had been looking at, doing a chocolate gig with functional mushrooms in it, and so she'd taken some chocolatier training, and I loved that that angle, I guess. It's not like to try and be clever, but to take desserts, to take like a focus on desserts and chocolate and bring it into camp was something that I thought was fascinating. She came all prepped for that, and we played with wild mint. That was her first ever rabbit.
It was spectacular.
And yes, she scoped herself real hard on this episode. On a deer encounter. She talks about it in the show, so I won't dive into that. Yeah, rabbits, and then that grouse right there, she had shot 2 in one shot. Thing about rabbits in the camp here is that in the spring they're everywhere, and in the fall they're not. And I don't know why, but they're just dumb in the spring, and they're easy to hunt. So the fact that I shoot a bunch of them in the spring and then you get one in the fall is a function of something about their reproduction that I'm not fully well versed on. So this is a few years into camp looking like that in the tent. We didn't used to film in the tent at all because it had bunks in it, and was just filled with bunk beds. And so this is a few years on now, maybe only 2 to 3, where we've been using the interior of the wall tent as like a film space like that. We put a table in the middle instead of bunks, and then some shelving, and instantly it just made it a far more livable space. So that setup right there is just a joy to, live in versus what we used to do. So just need to see it as a focal point. So as a creative guy, I'm often looking to film prep in the evening light like this by candles and kerosene. I think that looks great. What doesn't look great is finished plates. So my team know that we shoot food during the day. So like that light right there, food look great on camera, but we can film and do film little prep scenes like this to get this kind of very different lighting aesthetic. It's mostly it's not because I do love it, but it's because it's a variety. And I find that the variety is really important. So to hop from like a really well lit scene like this, and then into like this moody, all warm tone scene inside a tent at night, is just some nice visual variety. I would not want to shoot a whole episode in this light or in this vibe. I would not want to shoot a whole episode in like bright out exterior daylight either. So I'm always looking for opportunities to kind of shift the scenes so that they're varied. The main reason is it just makes it flow. There's something about the human brain that it just makes it flow really easily from one, makes it just very watchable. So like now I've kicked you outside, we're looking at the fire. I'm probably going to cut to a different day here. Yeah, dip to black. I always do that if I'm going to a different day. And here's a completely like cloud lit scene, or sunlit, but with cloud as a big softbox. Fun little scene. I think I talked to Jordan. I think she comes out of the tent there, which is... It's interesting again because there's one camera. Oh no, there's two cameras being run right now on me. And there's two of us in the scene kind of chatting to each other. I like this scene in particular because we are just chatting through it. Yeah.
Can you grab me a spoon, please?
That line was not planned, and her having to be in the tent was not planned. So just these kind of organic little moments that you're able to catch when you're self-filming is just a joy. Wild Mint Mojito was on the agenda. Hadn't worked with Wild Mint actually on the show like at all ever. And now we do all the time. It's so refreshing and smashy. It's so awesome.
That's really good.
So a scene like this, I've got a cam on a wide. That's that camera there. It's got me in the shot with some background to try to dodge being big bold light from the back. So. And then I've got a DSLR camera. My photo camera is shooting the second angle on that on a tripod as well. That's how I shoot those scenes. And beverage scenes tend to really like that. Anytime there's someone that's going to be sat down doing something with their hands, which happens with food a lot, I'll shoot the I'll shoot the wide with a cam, and I'll shoot a close up with my photo cam. This drink was awesome. There's no that's how that tasted. It's so good. So refreshing and so bright and so bold and so delicious in all the fronts. So. And, Jordan and I went straight from bush camp to grasslands camp. And this was one of the first years, an early era for this camp setup. Completely love it. So nice. We're working with prairie white sage. She just put it into a pie crust, and I was putting the flowers from her project into a syrup for a margarita. I had injured my face too on that trip. I talk about it in the episode, so we had matching head wounds. Blair was in camp, so that was a fun little moment for George to get to work with a chef of Blair's caliber. Jordan falls into the category of like me, not having worked in the food industry in the past, but just has an exorbitant amount of like at home and practical experience with the foraging stuff. So she was still intimidated to work with industry professionals at this point. I've spent 10 years doing that, so that to me doesn't faze me at all. But Blair was in camp to join us hunting. Blair likes hunting birds for reasons. He likes the variety in the meat stuffs, and he can't buy them into his restaurant or butchery. This is, I think, our first time ever throwing clays in camp, and it was so fun, and we do it fairly regularly now, but this was like the first try ever. Beautiful little scene. Love Jordan's enthusiasm. That's one of the things that's so fun about being in camp with her. She's just like super gets jazzed about lots of stuff. And Blair's just rocking it and slaying clays. It's a good shot. this scene, to me too, some of the things you don't know in the scene is that Jordan was told when she was looking at getting hunting that she wouldn't be able to handle a 12 gauge shotgun, and that face right there was her succeeding at shooting a 12 gauge shotgun. So she was just really excited, obviously, to be I don't know, leveling up. She'd just started hunting like a week prior to that, and now she's shooting stuff out of the air, and she ended up harvesting birds out of the air on this trip. So she was pretty. She learned a lot in a really fast period of time. Really highly recommend shooting clays as a great way to learn how to shotgun better. Love this scene, as I'd mentioned before. Love that shift between a daytime action something and then an evening scene, just for a shift of gears. You've got the crackle of the fire in the back, got some kerosene lit, hard shadows. These are really tough scenes to color grade properly. Not that matters to anybody, but that back wall is just that soft sagey green, and your cameras don't want to read it that way, so you have to kind of correct all that stuff in post. And this dish that she's working on, I speak to it in the episode, but it's bloody genius. And I just love this scene of the two of them, just kind of it's not collaborating. She's learning from Blair, and they're just working on a project that she wants to see through, and he's just offering his help. And that's a really cool shot. That's shot from the top bunk. And there's just a cam on a wide overhead, and that's the camera hopping around a fair bit. That's a very small space. It's hard to make it read that large. So it's always fun when you can use a wide lens and make it look big, and then some nice backlit stuff. Cooking at night here, that's tough. That's a lantern light, and I hate it, but it's what we have to do. I refuse to put electricity into this place, so it's LEDs powered by solar and kerosene, mostly kerosene. Jord had never seen the Northern Lights, I don't think, prior to this year, so this was a pretty big night to be able to film a scene like that. This is the first time. Since then, we've filmed Northern Lights down here like this, but this was the first time I've ever captured it. And the best Northern Lights of the last decade, of the entire series, is that shot right there. One thing I love about the grasslands is the mornings and evenings, the sunsets and sunrises are just always picturesque. They're just always worth filming. The light's amazing. Look at that light, just bonkers. And the color, it went from blue to orange. So good, love that shot. Love the angle of the sun. So cool to see. There's something about a duo of people that are very different people, team working something like this. It's just, I really like seeing it. I've been noticing that with me and Ma in the field and the late season stuff a lot lately. It's just really cool to see. Jordan came really close to shooting a crane there. She eventually did succeed at that and has won at that since. Snow geese on the agenda for a spring hunt here coming up. I'm going to start exploring that, and that's JP's first duck of her life. Really, really cool to see. I mean, look at the enthusiasm. It's just contagious. Super fun to be around again in camp, just because she's got that kind of energy.
I didn't even get too excited.
Always need to, just somebody appreciating a harvest period is great, and the food outcome, but for her it's about the feathers and the feet and all the little bits and bobs and other ways you can use an animal. It's really cool. This is the longest sit I've ever done for a deer. I sat there for probably 4 hours before he stood up. He was bedded down when I spotted him, and I just waited him out. I knew that was a thing. I'd never done it, and I thought, well, I'm just going to outpatience him. The problem is that, I just turned my head, right? If he had stood up in that moment, it would have been so embarrassing. So thankfully for me, I happened to be looking down the scope like this. That happened to be me with the camera running, because I didn't run a camera for 4 hours. It just so happened that I had hit record, was looking down the scope at him, and he stood up all in the same 2 minutes. So this is a bit of lucky filmmaking here. You'll see me see him. There you go. He stood up, and kaboom. And I smoked him. And this is a really cool scene. This never happens. John was literally self-filming with a GoPro while I shot. So I've got 2 camera perspectives of that shot moment. The odds of that having happened is almost 0. that he just happened to be rolling while just happened to be rolling while it all unfolded, because he was busy dealing with the deer. So really cool. John was just getting his jam on with rolling camera for YouTube stuff. So this is himself filming his deer haul out, and it's really neat for me to have that type of story element, to have that, I guess, someone else shooting content, because it's makes it a more rich story when you've got those layers. So that's me shooting me. That's on a DSLR. I did not have a cam in with me, so it's when I use light kit out of my backpack to just set up a couple cameras and try and capture the scene. It's usually not what I want to see, but it's it does give you the scene. And what I want, meaning like I don't want to be filming a GoPro like that with a bit of warp to it from the super wide angle and the awful color that the GoPro gets. It's like I don't want to be shooting that as my primary A cam in that moment, but I got, it's got the shot. You get the intensity of the moment and me breathing, and like I just didn't want to blow it after waiting that long. I just didn't want to blow it. That's why the intensity. It wasn't a big buck at all, and it just was that relief from having, not screwed up. That felt so good. Again, John self-filming. This is actually John on camera 2 here. He's with me. It doesn't cut that. It doesn't read that way in the edit, but that is Schneider there, and the other, or Fraser now. And this moment, I'm pumped because that rack went just underneath that fence. Would have been a bit of a problem if it didn't. Highly recommend a deer drag like that in a sled. I don't think there's a better way to get an animal out of the bush. Quads and trucks are good, but they have their limitations, and that sled and harness setup almost has no limitation other than you might have to take an animal apart. And then Mai in this episode shoots her first deer. Super exciting. Super long shot. The first time ever, you'll see the rifle sat there on my backpack, the back of it, and the barrel sat on a log. The deer was bedded down, again, similarly to my buck, but she didn't even have to hold the rifle. The rifle was like locked onto that deer, and fully 100% stable. And when she squeezed the trigger, so 220-yard heart shot. Won't forget that one anytime soon. And the weird bit here is that Henry shoots his first deer. This is Mai's first ever deer. Henry shoots his first ever deer in the same episode. And Henry's deer died almost exactly, like you could see where the blood stain from Mai's deer, where Henry's deer died. So we came in on the other side of the wind. It doesn't matter, but just weird that all of these encounters happen in this one spot. This is a really cool scene. My heli Daka's in her hand right there. Working on a project with a knife maker, and he's asking me which knife we use the most in the field, and it's that heli Daka, not because it's the best knife I own, but because it's the one that is easy to carry, so it's just what we have with us. Props to Mai for wanting to learn how to field dress, and this is, I really like this scene actually. It's a really cool scene. Love that interview, love the lighting in that space, love that stove so much. And this is all shot actually with, I didn't have A-cam with me here either. The footage of my having shot was with iPhones, and that's A-cam, and the camera in the field with her is a DSLR. That's a DSLR. And that's a bloodstained shirt. I only carry so much clothing in the field, and that happens to be I got a little messy with, I think, my deer, and so I just had decor on me for the rest of that shoot. There's some heavy fog. Man. I shoot those trees a lot, and I shoot this building a lot, and I find it looks so different depending on the light, a summer storm with big, huge rolling clouds, or is it fog like that, or snow? Look at the fat on that deer. That is a healthy deer. Very healthy deer. And very happy me, because those rails were built for that purpose, to hang animals there. That's why those rails are there, is so we have a place for them, and that's us using them like I intended. And Mai's about to get to making a mule deer tagine, and that oven is awesome, and everything that's been baked in that oven has been a surprisingly heavy success. All right, last episode. this almost got ditched. There were so many strong episodes in this season that this just felt like it wasn't a complete story or a rich enough story for 30 minutes. It was really disjointed and disconnected. This is my actually practicing or learning how to shoot a rifle before that hunt that you just saw her on. So this happened before that. And so it didn't really make sense in that episode, and there was so much other stuff that happened in that episode that we just saw that this got dropped from it. But it was all part of, our lived experience, and losing it, all this footage and the sound in this scene is unreal. Put it on good speakers. Unreal. And all that breath. Look at that. That's so cool. All the light, her reactions to the shooting, all of this to me was super interesting, and would have been a shame to have just hit the delete button and never seen the light of day. So I decided to interweave these storylines of my learning to shoot and my hunt and Jordan's hunt and John's hunt and Henry's hunt, and just kind of fold it all into me. That first shot you saw was the ending, which is I started with the end, which I never do, making the buck ribs from the buck that I rattled in. So yeah, am I in love with this episode? No, it's named Untitled because it almost didn't see the light of day. But there's so many important to me moments. This is one of them. Jordan had shot her first deer by now with her brother in this exact location, around where her family lives in Alberta. And but this was the first time that her and I had been hunting together and her shoot a deer. So she totally connected there. And she has that deer skull from that particular shot in a stage of crafting. And this is a really cool scene too. This is, again, she's a quick study, and I kind of told her what she needed to do to track her deer with the blood once we found blood. And she just went to it, and got it done. And it was smooth. Since then we've been on some not smooth tracking, but, it did require some paying attention and some skills. So it's neat to kind of see that happen through this moment. Yeah, venison became a huge thing for Jordan in her home. Her kids have really preferred it or chosen it as or adopted it as their favorite thing to eat. So her filling her freezer with whitetail or deer has become really important to her. So it's neat to see her go from first time hunter even earlier in this season of season 10 to this wasn't even her first big game animal. She'd shot deer she shot grouse, sharptails and ruffed grouse and spruce grouse and rabbits and mallard and all kind, and a whitetail by this point. So she leveled up fast. Cool drone shot just to kind of give the viewer some space from what was happening and kind of be able to cut to the next piece of action, which is her finding the deer.
She's right here.
And typical JP style, some high levels of excitement. That was, I think, the third or fourth deer that was shot with a rifle on my Fjallraven Stubben backpack. Just as an aside, that backpack has seen a lot of dead deer. Highly recommend. Yes, they gave it to me. It's the Fjallraven Stubben. Love the thing. Really lovely moment here. This was, if you know the show, this wasn't staged. We didn't ask her to do this. It's just kind of an organic, natural reaction in the moment for her. But it filmed beautifully. Always love that kind of the love of light kiss in that one. So nice. Those eye shots to me are just kind of punchy and personal and kind of almost make you uncomfortable as a viewer, which I think is a nice thing. When something's dying, that at least you could do is feel a bit bad. Cool overhead shot at camp. This is something we don't normally see. It showed me how out of square absolutely everything in that camp is, which is hilarious. And I forgive myself for it because there's nothing level in that camp at all. It's all just a
Wood Library Day.
piece of rolly river valley.
I get to restock.
I've shot in camp before. We did the Donair off with John in camp here. Always kind of ask myself why I don't film here more, because it's such a great set, I guess. It just looks cool, and it is cool. But there is kind of a place disconnect. It's one of the things I don't like about this episode, or didn't like, and still don't like, is that my deer was shot near bush camp, and I didn't cook there. And Jordan and I were filming her hunt somewhere else, and we didn't cook there. We just kind of, so you've got a kind of a hunt scene that's disconnected from the food scene, and while maybe that seems like purist, it's something that is important to me to keep that connectivity. Also, Jordan's not here, John, who's also in this episode, is not here, Mai's not here, Henry's not here, so I'm just kind of eating alone, which is, I don't know, just sad. Those were really good, by the way. The ribs turned out great. And the whole idea of trying to sell the idea that the ribs on a deer are actually food is kind of not nailed down. I don't know if this whole episode felt awkward to me, or off. So almost died, but I decided that diarizing, or letting that part of my life diary live, was more important than it being perfect. Thanks, Rick Rubin. So that is season 10.